Welcome to the 7th Planet Broadcasting special series, The Anunnaki, for Season 1, Episode 6. I am your host, Matt LaCroix, and I'm joined by best-selling author and radio personality, Gerald Clark, and truth seekers and ancestral researchers, Christa Clark, Troy Gothard, and Zechariah Lang.
Travel with us from the deserts of the Four Corners region of the United States southward through the Aztec and Toltec cities of Tenochtitlan and Tolan, tracing the genetic origins for the Mesoamericans. Could the Atzlan be the Aztec word for the legendary city of Atlantis? If so, why would the Aztec migration story indicate Aztlan was located in the southwestern United States?
Could the Four Corners region and the deserts of the southwestern United States and Mayan codex hold the keys to understanding the legend of Amaruca and the true origins of the plumed serpent?
Following the evidence left behind, we will search to uncover the truth behind the origins of Atzlan. Is there an important connection to be made linking the legend of the four divine brothers of Mexico to the ancient Aztec and Toltec tribes? Could the four brothers really be the same Anunnaki gods worshipped in Sumer, Iraq, halfway across the world? Let's follow the evidence to find out.
Native cultures called the region of Atzlan in the southwestern United States the White Place, and legend says it was the birthplace of the Toltecs and the Aztec races. According to Mexican sources, the word Atzlan in the Nahuatl language is composed of the two root words, Atzl and Tlan, meaning heron and place of, respectively. Neither description as the White Place or the place of the heron links Atzlan to a specific geography as presented. This is our dilemma.
The first region, claimed to be Atzlan, covers a vast area of the United States. The Four Corners region of Colorado, Wyoming, Arizona, Utah, along with traces of advanced societies further east, for those living in Marfa, Texas region and along the Mississippi River, are all potentially affiliated with the name Atzlan, as depicted on the map, with states impacted in the color red.
At one time, the Aztlan tribes covered an area from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the east to the Gulf of Mexico. According to the legend, four divine brothers hailed from this region of Aztlan and migrated south to Mexico, with Tenochtitlan becoming the final Aztec capital, which was later destroyed by the Spanish under Cortez in 1521. The Toltec half-brother tribe landed in nearby Tolan.
Along the way, these advanced races created countless settlements and monolithic structures which celebrated the seasons and celestial movements of the stars. With so much knowledge available to the Atzlan culture, the real question is, where did they acquire it? Could there be links to the Anunnaki gods that were shown to be involved with teaching mankind the secrets of the calendar and language?
So what do we know about the Aztec and Toltec races? And could the described homeland Atzlan be a well-known, highly civilized home base from which they were sent away unwillingly? The Aztec and Toltecs of Mexico trace themselves back to a starting point called Atzlan. The Popol Vuh speaks of a visit paid by three sons of the king of Quiches to a land in the east on the shores of the sea whence their fathers had come, from which they brought back, amongst other things, a system of writing. We should be asking ourselves if this is a reference to the advanced cultures that hailed from Egypt and Sumer at a minimum, given what was disclosed in episode 4, Calendar Quarrels and the Mayan Lawn Count.
Amongst the Indians of North America, a widely held legend states that their forefathers came from a land toward the rising sun to the east. The Iowa and Dakota Indians, according to Major J. Lind, believed that all the Native American tribes were formerly one and dwelt together on an island towards the sunrise. This supposition is supported by modern genetic studies linking the Native Americans to a single source from the western edge of the Bering Strait.
The original home of the Nahuilacas was Atzlan, the location of which has been subject of much discussion. The causes that led to their exodus from that country can only be conjectured, but they may have been driven out by their enemies, for Atzlan is described as a land too fair and bountiful to be left willingly in the mere hope of finding a better place. A native tradition relates that a bird was heard for several days, constantly repeating the word Tiawi, meaning let us go. This, Quetzalcoatl, foremost and wisest among the Nahuilaka chiefs, took to be a message from the gods, directing the people to seek a new home. Who were these mysterious four brothers, and how did the Native American races and lore connect to the Mexica, who later became known as the Aztecs? Perhaps the Botarini Codex will shed some light on these questions.
The Botarini Codex is an early Aztec writing which describes the ancient migration from Aztlan to Mexico. These important codices also describe Aztec gods, known as the four divine brothers who accompanied the migration from Aztlan to Teotihuacan and Tolan.
One of the most important pieces of the Botarini Codex shows a clear depiction of a serpent god leading the migration of the Atzlan. Could this serpent god have connections back to Quetzalcoatl and the plumed serpent, which is seen all over Mesoamerica?
The final image from the Botarini Codex symbolizes the completion of the long migration route from Atzlan to the final destination of Teotihuacan, Mexico. With such clear depictions and images of these various Aztec gods known as the Four Brothers, why is much of this important information still treated as myth?
The evidence left behind paints a far different picture of the past than we have been told about the tribes of Atzlan. Why were these supposedly primitive cultures so focused on advanced astronomy and the calendar? Who could have given them that knowledge, and could it connect back to the gods of Sumer and Egypt?
Strong evidence linking ancient astronaut influences on the Atzlan can be found in the Four Corners region of the United States, if one assumes that to be the location according to the Aztec tradition.
High upon the Colorado Plateau, the impressive megalithic ruins of Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon have captivated explorers and visitors for hundreds of years. The sites beckon a forgotten time when the Aztlan tribes built important temples and monuments along their migration route south towards Mexico.
Countless secrets still remain at the locations of both Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, which have puzzled mainstream archaeologists and researchers. Found in barren desert locations, the true age of the sites may be much older than we have been told, and were occupied in the past when water was more plentiful.
The cave dwellings at Mesa Verde and ruins at Chaco Canyon show clear evidence for advanced knowledge and building techniques which seem to mimic those found all throughout Mexico and Central America. How could this be possible unless they are all connected?
The spectacular cave dwellings of Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde National Park, located in southwestern Colorado, provide a window into the past to a branch of the Atzlan culture known as the ancestral Puebloans.
This ancient culture created a large, interconnected network of cave dwellings and passages that represent the largest of its kind in North America. Built of sandstone, mortar, and wooden beams, this cliff city represents an important social and ceremonial center for the ancestral Pueblo people.
Mesa Verde National Park Cliff Palace contains 23 sunken circular rooms known as kivas, which acted as important ceremonial areas for the Puebloan culture. The ancestral Puebloans at Cliff Palace and related sites formed a complex trade network that stretched far and wide across the Colorado Plateau, linking hundreds of Atzlan communities. The ancestral Puebloan people held a distinct knowledge of advanced celestial sciences, which formed the backbone of their architectural designs. To understand the ancestral Puebloan people better and their complex understanding of the stars, let's travel southeast to New Mexico to the spectacular site, Chaco Canyon.
Chaco Canyon is located in the western deserts of New Mexico, in an ancient river valley high up on the arid Colorado Plateau. The Chaco ruins were the cultural heart of the ancestral Puebloan people and contain the largest population of Atzlan in all of the Southwest, at one time numbering in the thousands.
Chaco Canyon was built using quarried sandstone and timber hauled from great distances away, erecting 15 megalithic structures. Up until the 19th century, these were the largest buildings in all of North America. The real question is, why would the ancestral Puebloan people migrating southward have decided to leave this dry canyon home, which took years of painstaking manual labor to construct? The remote site is now one of the most extensive and important ruins in all of the United States. Perhaps there is far more to Chaco Canyon culture and mythos than meets the eye.
Many buildings and structures found at Chaco Canyon were constructed to precisely align with specific solar and lunar time events, proving that the ancestral Puebloan people possessed extensive and detailed astronomical knowledge. The large megaliths of Pueblo Bonito and Quetzalcoatl are precisely aligned along an east-west line, along with an axis that captures the passage of sunlight during the equinox. The buildings and complexes found at Chaco span over 9 miles through the dry valley, and perhaps the most important site of all, potentially linking ancient Anunnaki influences, may be found at Casa Rinconada.
Found isolated to the south, the enormous structure of Casa Rinconada forms a large circular ring and is known as the Great Kiva. This site functioned as an important astronomical observatory for the Puebloan people and is aligned precisely along a specific axis that mirrors the passage of the sun and moon during pivotal times. The Puebloan people worship the sun and moon, and this similarity can be found all throughout advanced cultures of Mesoamerica and as lineages back to ancient Iraq and Egypt. With a 64-foot diameter and a half-mile circumference, Casa Rinconada is a striking reminder of the advanced knowledge and building practices utilized by the ancestral Puebloan people. The real question is, who gave them this important knowledge, and could there be a larger purpose for their construction, connecting back to the Four Brothers and the gods of the Aztec and Toltec tribes?
How could the Aztlan tribes construct such monumental and precise monolithic buildings, aligned so perfectly to cycles of the sun and moon with no advanced technology? Reviewing rainfall data from the region, we discover that a bygone era beset with abundant rainfall allowed the Aztlan culture to thrive and build there. Now, why live in such a remote geographic region of such climate extremes? Could there perhaps be other reasons that the Aztlan choose to build there? Perhaps connecting to the stars or due to the ley lines of the earth?
To answer these tough questions about this mysterious culture, we will have to travel back to early migration routes of the Atzlan people. Early ancestral researchers like Hubert Howe Bancroft have uncovered important information to better piece together the story.
Hubert Howe Bancroft was born in Granville, Ohio in 1832 and was a passionate researcher and historian. The collection of his works and findings are known as the Bancroft Library, maintained by the University of California at Berkeley.
The Bancroft Library officially dates from 1905, when the University of California acquired Hubert Howe Bancroft's personal library and research. However, it was actually born 42 years earlier when Bancroft, assisting the editor of a projected guidebook to the Western states, discovered 75 volumes pertaining to California and the West on the shelves of his San Francisco bookstore. Suddenly bitten by the collecting bug, the native New Englander began accumulating works on the history of his adopted state. Over time, the scope of his interest came to encompass the entire trans-Mississippi West, extending from Alaska to Central America.
Ultimately, Bancroft saw his collection as history awaiting an author. Unable to find scholars willing to tackle his massive accumulation of books and manuscripts, Bancroft elected to write a history himself with the aid of a staff of interviewers, transcribers, and writers. The final work encompasses 39 volumes covering the native races of Central America, Mexico, the North Mexican states, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, the Northwest Coast, Alaska, and the remainder of the American West. Mr. Bancroft's work on the native races became an important piece of understanding the Bering Strait and the sea migration routes of North America through South America.
Early migration maps showed that travel was possible between the Bering Strait of Alaska and Russia due to much lower ocean levels and the large amounts of water which were being locked up in glaciers during the last ice age. This made it possible for a migration route from the steppes of Mongolia to the southern United States, although later evidence indicates that the terrain was not as hospitable for a land migration, given the lack of food and water. This led many to believe that a nautical route was taken from the western part of the Bering Strait southward along the Aleutian Islands, southwards along the coast of North America.
Could the legacy of Genghis Khan be connected to this early migration route of this single genetic source for the Native Americans, originating from the steppes of Mongolia? Perhaps the evidence will show that the root of the Atzlan came from multiple locations and regions, although the genetic studies seem to clearly indicate one source location.
New data has shown that 12,000 years ago, when the Bering Sea was connected by ice and shallow seas, that conditions could have been too hostile for travel to completely account for all the cultures of the Americas. Could there have been an alternative migration route that came from the east?
Amongst the Indians of North America, there's a very general legend that their forefathers came from a land toward the rising sun. The Iowa and Dakota Indians, according to Major J. Lynn, believed that all tribes of the Indians were formerly one and dwelt together on an island towards the sunrise. They crossed the sea from thence in huge skiffs in which the Dakotas of old floated for weeks, finally gaining dry land. The Central American books state that a part of the American continent extended far into the Atlantic Ocean, and that this region was destroyed by a series of frightful cataclysms at long intervals apart. It is a curious confirmation that the Celts of Britain had a legend that part of their country once extended far into the Atlantic and was destroyed. 3 catastrophes are mentioned in the Welsh tradition. Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican deity, is said to have come from the distant east. He is described as a white man with a flowing beard. Note that the indigenous people of North and South America are beardless. He originated letters and regulated the Mexican calendar. After having taught them peaceful arts and lessons, he sailed away to the east in a canoe of serpent skins.
Could the land mentioned in the distant east have been alluding to the Atlantean ocean civilizations headed by Poseidon? Were the Native American races all connected to a single source in the Atlantic, traveling to the Americas via sailing vessels as implied? If so, does this add credence to the Emerald Tablet writings describing a multi-regional migration from Chem Egypt at an earlier time, circa 16,000 years ago, landing in North and South America? This hypothesis would circumvent the Bering Strait migration routes proposed to have occurred at the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,500 years ago, as the region would not have been traversable until much later, given the glaciers present and the difficulty passing south to Alaska, as proposed. Thus, it is highly probable that the Atzlan tribes were established from the east, arriving by boat, and affiliated with a priestly dispersal ordered by Thoth from Egypt, or Poseidon Atlantis, and therefore affiliated in some way.
So where did the Toltec and their half-brother tribe, the Aztec, originate, claiming Aztlan to be their birthplace? Perhaps the legend of the four brothers can provide clues pinpointing this historically significant site. Coupled with an inspection of the written records and codices, our understanding shall be increased.
The legend of the four brothers speaks of four Atzlan gods. Who really were these mysterious four brothers?
The table shows them in the order of their birth, the cardinal point, element, and color assigned to each of them. Recall that the four sons of Horus were also assigned cardinal points and elements as well. It is posited that the firstborn son, Tlatoqui, was the bloodline ancestor of the Native American people which the Atzlan region specifies. His cardinal direction was north, his element earth, and his color was red. Tezcatlipoca, the second-born son, was assigned cardinal point south, element wind, and the color black. Quetzalcoatl, the third-born son, was assigned to the cardinal direction east, element fire, and color white. He was known as the god of wisdom and the winged or plumed serpent god. Huitzilopochtli, the fourth-born son, was assigned to the cardinal direction west, the element water, and the color blue. He was the war god that demanded human sacrifices.
Spanish conquistadors first reached the southwest region in the 16th century, and violent clashes erupted between the Atzlan tribes. Over the coming years, the Spanish, led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, launched a merciless war to colonize the region and control the native people, seen as nothing more than a nuisance to them. Coronado and his armies moved through the southwest, pillaging and stealing important relics and artifacts from the cultures of the Atzlan. This common theme has dominated the native cultures of the Americas and will serve as a black mark for all of history.
During the Spanish conquest, a series of important animal skins covered in symbolic writing and art was obtained in Mexico and is known as the Borgia Codex. The document is named after the Italian cardinal and historian Stefano Borgia, who acquired the manuscript and later sold it to the Vatican, where it still resides in the church archives to this day.
The Borgia Codex is an important manuscript seized during the Spanish conquest and was found in Puebla, just outside Mexico City. The document is composed of layers of animal skins that are folded together to create a running story that chronicles the important Aztec history and sacred rituals to the gods.
The Borgia Codex contains 18 pages of detailed astronomical data showing a close connection to the forgotten Atzlan culture and the stars. The codex shows a deep understanding of the four brothers and frequently talks about Quetzalcoatl and the passing of Venus.
The Borgia Codex represents only a piece of a much larger collection of Atzlan, Aztec, and Mayan codices that are called the Borgia Group. The Borgia Group represents a number of pre-Columbian codices that form an epic story describing in detail the Atzlan creation story, celebration of star alignments, and the important rituals handed down to these cultures.
Why would the church be interested in these ancient animal skin codices? Is it perhaps because it connects back to the truth of the four brothers and their Anunnaki legacy? Has the church been controlling and manipulating the important evidence linking the gods of history for thousands of years?
Huitzilopochtli's demand for blood sacrifice and war for the Aztec led to tribal conflicts throughout the region. Warring and destructive motives among the Aztec diverted attention from the pursuit of knowledge and spiritual life to focus as a warring culture. Are there malevolent forces evident that were used by the Anunnaki to destroy civilizations like the Aztec? Blood sacrifice was the ultimate way to corrupt a culture, misleading participants into believing it appeased the gods and would provide safety, security, and plenty. Thousands had their hearts ripped out from Moctezuma II from his evil ways, placating a Moloch-like war god from the pits of hell. Considering there were four brothers, not all were destructive, but were considered serpent gods. Tenochtitlan's Temple Mayor had twin towers dedicated to the fire serpent god and rain serpent god.
Is there a connection to the Chinese four dragons legend on the other side of the world? Notice the striking similarities between the colors of the dragons and the elements that they portray as gods.
Is there an important legacy left behind shown through the plumed serpent connection to Quetzalcoatl and the cultures in the United States and Mexico? Native cultures all across the Americas dress themselves in an array of colorful feathers and headdresses. We are reminded that the Aztec were told to wear feathers in their hair, carry arrows, as ordered by the war god during their exodus from Atzlan.
Evidence shows that this use of feathers was a symbolic gesture to honor their great god, Quetzalcoatl, which to them was portrayed as a winged serpent. This plumed serpent symbology can be seen all over Mesoamerica and speaks to a lost connection back to the winged dragon. Recall the symbology of the eagle clutching a serpent seated on a cactus growing from a rock in the midst of a lagoon. Is this not symbolically stating a successful subjugation of the snake by the eagle, Quetzalcoatl's civilization destroyed by Enlil's hired Spanish conquistador barbarians?
Has this symbolic use of feathers, seen by native cultures, been purposefully misinterpreted in our history books to falsely connect back to the eagle and the Anunnaki gods of war? Tracing this important symbology back throughout the ages, we find a strong correlation to those countries who adopted the eagle and those who became warring superpowers. This symbol was a standard among the Roman army. The double-headed eagle was historically used by Ninurta Apollo, son of the Anunnaki Lord of the Command, namely Enlil.
Digging deeper into the legends of the Atzlan people and their true origins, we find evidence further south in Guatemala, linking their origin story in a book called the Popol Vuh.
The legend of the Popol Vuh, which translates to mean Book of the People, originates in the western highlands of Guatemala and forms the creation myth for the Mayan Quiche people. The Popol Vuh mirrors a similar creation story to that of the Mayan Codex, and speaks about an ancestral lineage to the gods who came from the east and their advanced knowledge of cosmology.
Does the Mayan Codex and Popol Vuh prove that the Atzlan migration route didn't purely come from the Bering Strait, as history books tell us? Or are the true origins found far to the east in Africa, as told to us through the Olmec and Toltec cultures? Maybe the logical conclusion from data is that both were simultaneously happening, but genetic evidence seems to point to the eastern origins for the Mesoamericans as told in their legends and codices.
To find more answers for the truth behind the origins of the Aztec and Four Brothers, we will travel back north to the southwest corner of the United States, where many secrets still remain with the Hopi and Pueblo tribes.
The name Hopi means peaceful people and represents a branch of the Atzlan and Pueblo cultures in Arizona. The Hopi believed deeply in the preservation of life and had a deep spiritual connection back to the caretaker of the earth they called Masao, along with the celebration of the cosmos.
Some of the most compelling evidence for ancient Anunnaki intervention in the distant past can be seen with the megalithic ruins and mesas in the Four Corners region. If viewed from above, we find striking similarities which precisely mimic the constellation of Orion, which has been seen worshipped by advanced cultures all over the world, from Giza in Egypt to Teotihuacan in Mexico.
The evidence left behind for the precise alignments of pyramids and temples to the cosmos, as seen in Teotihuacan, Mexico, and many other locations, shows striking similarities to building techniques used by the gods of Sumer and Egypt alike. Could the knowledge possessed by the divine Four Brothers have originated in this same region to the east of the Americas in the known cradles of civilization?
To this day, the Hopi elders continue to pass important stories and legends down through the generations, which speak about the gods who led their people to the safety of caves during a colossal deluge on Earth. The same story is echoed in every major religion in the world and speaks to a forgotten time when much of our history was lost from this cataclysm.
Halfway across the world in Derinkuyu, Turkey, we find massive underground cities that could hold more than 20,000 people. An important clue found at the underground caves may link the site to a deluge story or protection from an invading army. Each cave entrance is protected by a large round stone, which was positioned to seal off doorways completely. The specific design of these stones and massive size shows that they were specifically constructed to protect those inside from an external, hostile threat. Numerous other underground cities can be found throughout the world, along with similar stories echoed by ancient cultures like the Hopi, which speak to cataclysms in our past supposedly caused by the gods.
The Hopi and Pueblo people left behind important petroglyphs on rocks and cliffs, which tell the forgotten stories of the Aztlan culture and the gods who influenced them.
Many of these petroglyphs and the true meanings behind them have puzzled researchers and historians for years. Who exactly are the beings shown with large eyes and elongated skulls? Could the Hopi have been trying to tell us something all along about the gods of history, known as the Anunnaki, or some other extraterrestrial race?
The conquest of the United States and Mexico proved catastrophic for the native people of Aztlan. Millions in the region were nearly wiped out and annihilated by the Spanish through war and disease, and those that did survive the Western expansion and further onslaught now exist on unwanted federal land turned into reservations in America. Consider the standoff taking place in North Dakota over an oil pipeline and water rights on federal versus native lands in the headlines now. Nothing has changed for the indigenous races that encountered the Spanish and European invaders long ago, perhaps even worse today.
The legacy of Atzlan in the Americas lives on through the use of storytelling and the preservation of their important cultural heritage. Even after the devastation caused by the Spanish conquistadors to the region, the ancient teachings left behind by the god Quetzalcoatl still remain, and wait for a time when they can once again be heard and understood. Could that time be now?
It seems the victors of history are often those who condemned free thought outside of the confines of the church and seek to quell any connection back to the forgotten plumed serpent god, Amaru. By learning the truth of who these native cultures really were and about their important traditions, we can protect the knowledge they have passed on for thousands of years and allow their memory to truly live on forever.
It seems there's been a forgotten connection from the Atzlan cultures that leads all the way back to Quetzalcoatl and the plumed serpent. Was this possibly the historical basis for an ongoing battle among the Anunnaki clans? Enki's clan seeking to preserve the lost Atlantean ways in pure cultures affiliated with his son, the wise plumed serpent Quetzalcoatl, versus those of the Enlil clan, symbolized by the predatory eagle, hell-bent on global dominion, conquest, and war.
The story of the Atzlan will live on and speaks to a time when a connection back to the heart of the earth and the nature of the universe was shared by all. Perhaps in retrospection, mankind can learn far more about the past cultures than we realize, correct our course, and reconnect with our spiritual side.
Join us for the next Anunnaki series, Season 1 in Mesoamerica, for the grand finale in Episode 7, The Legacy of Quetzalcoatl. Together, we will rediscover the lost knowledge and civilization spawned by the winged serpent, tracing his steps from Nibiru to Atlantis, then to Chem Egypt, and finally in the Americas. What is the final prophecy of this extraterrestrial intelligence for mankind? Thank you for watching.